In the Alaskan wilderness, the silence is often a warning. Welcome, friends. Tonight, I'm sharing 5 bone-chilling, true accounts from the last frontier. Let me know in the comments your location and the current time. Please hit that subscribe button to help us hit 1,000 subs, and don't forget to like the video if you enjoy the scares. Get comfortable, dim the lights, and prepare yourselves. The fear is real. I've been cleaning hospitals for 23 years. You'd think after 2 decades of mopping up blood, bile, and worse, nothing would shake me anymore. You'd be wrong. My name is Elena Kovac, and I work the graveyard shift at Providence, Alaska Medical Center in Anchorage. 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 5 nights a week. The pay is decent, the work is steady, and at 51 years old with a mortgage and a daughter at UAF, I can't afford to be picky. Most people hate night work, but I've always preferred it. Fewer supervisors breathing down your neck, no doctors barking orders, no visitors clogging the hallways. Just me, my cart, and the fluorescent hum of empty corridors. They assigned me to the basement 3 years ago. Nobody else wanted it. The newer hires would last maybe 2 weeks before requesting a transfer, citing the cold, the isolation, the oppressive feeling of being underground. I didn't mind. Down there, I could work at my own pace, listen to my podcasts, get lost in the rhythm of scrubbing and sanitizing. The basement houses the old administrative archives, the industrial laundry facility, maintenance storage, and the decommissioned morgue from the 1970s. That morgue is where everything went wrong. It's a relic from when the hospital was much smaller, before they built the modern pathology wing upstairs. The room itself is about 30 feet by 40, with those old mint green tiles that haven't been manufactured since Nixon was president. There are rusted gurneys stacked against one wall, ancient filing cabinets with broken locks, and 3 stainless steel examination tables, or what we call gurneys, that nobody ever bothered to remove. The air down there is different. Colder than the rest of the basement, even though the heating system supposedly reaches every corner. It carries a smell too, not quite decay, but something stale and forgotten, like opening a book that's been sealed in a trunk for decades. I clean that room every night. It's part of my rotation. And every single night for the past 4 months, something has been terribly, horrifyingly wrong. It started small. The kind of thing you dismiss as exhaustion playing tricks. I positioned those 3 gurneys against the far wall before I started mopping, all lined up parallel, wheels locked. Standard procedure, get the equipment out of the way, clean the floor, move on. But when I returned to do a final inspection before leaving, one gurney would be sitting in the center of the room. Not rolled, not askew, perfectly centered, as if someone had measured the exact middle point of the floor and placed it there with geometric precision. The first time it happened, I figured I'd forgotten. Maybe I'd moved it myself while cleaning and didn't remember. I was tired. Working nights does things to your memory, fragments it. But then it happened again. And again. Every single night. I started documenting it. I'd take a photo on my phone before I left the room, time-stamped. Then I'd finish the rest of my basement rounds, the laundry room, the archives, the storage areas, and return. The photo would show all 3 gurneys against the wall. The room would show one in the center. My supervisor, Derek, is a smug 32-year-old kid from Wasilla who got the position because his uncle sits on the hospital board. When I showed him the photos, he smirked. "Elena, you're probably just tired. When's the last time you took a vacation?" I told him I wasn't imagining it. He sighed and said he'd look into it, which in Derek speak meant he'd do absolutely nothing. 2 weeks later, I found him outside the basement entrance with an installation crew. "We're putting in a camera," he announced, like he was doing me some enormous favor. "This should clear everything up." They mounted a security camera in the corner of the morgue, angled to capture the entire room. Derek gave me this patronizing smile. Now we'll see what's really going on. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt a creeping dread settling into my bones. That night, I cleaned the morgue same as always. The camera's little red light blinked in the corner, watching. I positioned the gurneys, took my photo, left. When I came back 40 minutes later, one gurney sat in the center of the room. My hands were shaking as I called Derek. He was annoyed. It was 2 in the morning, but he agreed to check the footage remotely. The phone went silent for almost 5 minutes. When he came back on, his voice had changed. The smugness was gone. Elena, there's something wrong with the feed. What do you mean? Come up to the security office. You need to see this. I abandoned my cart and took the stairs 2 at a time, my heart hammering against my ribs. The security office is a cramped room on the 2nd floor, walls covered in monitors showing feeds from all over the hospital. Derek was hunched over a keyboard, his face pale in the screen glow. He didn't look at me as I entered. Watch, he said, and hit play. The footage showed the morgue from the camera's perspective. There I was, pushing my cleaning cart in, arranging the gurneys against the wall. Everything looked normal. I watched myself mop, methodical and efficient, the timestamp counting forward. Then I left the frame. For 3 minutes and 47 seconds, nothing moved. The room was perfectly still, exactly as I'd left it. Then the feed cut to static. Pure white noise, crackling and hissing. The timestamp continued counting, but there was no image. This lasted for 4 minutes and 12 seconds. When the picture returned, one gurney sat in the center of the room. There was no transition. No shadowy figure wheeling it. No gradual movement. Just static, then the gurney in a new position. That's impossible, I whispered. The camera malfunctioned right when. That's what I thought, Derek interrupted. But look at the timestamp. No gaps. The feed didn't cut out. It's just interference. But only in that specific room, and only during those 4 minutes. We watched it 3 more times. Same result. Static obscuring whatever moved that gurney. Derek's hands were trembling. I'm going to call maintenance. Get the camera checked. There's got to be an electrical issue. But I was already remembering something. A conversation I had months ago with Bernard, one of the older maintenance guys who'd worked here since the 80s. He'd mentioned something about the old morgue, about why they'd closed it. Strange accidents, he'd said. Equipment failures. 3 nurses disappeared during a night shift in '76. Just gone. They searched the whole hospital, never found them. After that, they moved the morgue upstairs. I'd laughed it off as hospital legend. Every old building has ghost stories. I wasn't laughing anymore. Maintenance replaced the camera. Same result. Static during a 4-minute window, gurney repositioned. They checked for electromagnetic interference, faulty wiring, underground water mains affecting the equipment. Nothing. The hospital administration got involved. They sent technicians from a security company in Fairbanks. Same outcome. Eventually, Derek stopped trying to explain it. He just avoided talking to me about the basement altogether. But the gurneys weren't finished with me. 3 weeks ago, I entered the morgue for my nightly cleaning and froze in the doorway. The gurney in the center of the room, the one that appeared there every night, had something on it. Fabric. I approached slowly, my breath forming clouds in the frigid air. It was a nurse's uniform. Old-fashioned, the kind with the white cap and the thick material they don't use anymore. The fabric was stained dark brown, old blood, oxidized and crusted. The uniform was laid out carefully, as if arranged on an invisible body. Arms positioned at the sides, legs straight. I backed out of the room and stood in the hallway, gulping air, telling myself this was fatigue, stress, anything but what my eyes were showing me. I pulled out my phone and called Derek. Voicemail. Called the night supervisor for the whole hospital. No answer. Everyone upstairs was dealing with an emergency intake, multiple car accident victims from the Glen Highway. I was alone. I forced myself back into the room. The uniform was still there. Real. Solid. I could smell the musty decay of old fabric and something underneath, something worse. Using a mop handle, I lifted the sleeve. The bloodstains formed patterns, handprints, smears, arterial spray. This was from something violent. I documented everything with my phone camera, then bagged the uniform using biohazard protocol. In the morning, I handed it to Derek along with my photos. He stared at the bag like it might explode. Where the hell did this come from? I don't know. It was just there. They sent the uniform to the police. Historical evidence, they said. The blood was too degraded for DNA analysis, but forensic examination confirmed it was human blood, decades old. The uniform matched those worn by Providence nurses in the mid-1970s. Derek pulled me into his office. Elena, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Are you doing this? Some kind of elaborate prank? The accusation hit me like a slap. Are you serious? Why the hell would I? Because none of this makes sense. He was shouting now, veins popping in his forehead. Gurneys moving on camera, blackouts, vintage uniforms appearing. You're the only one down there. Check my employment record. 23 years, never a single disciplinary action. You think I'd suddenly start staging horror shows in a morgue? He deflated. No. I don't. But I don't know what else to think. Neither did I. Last week, things escalated. I found a second uniform on a second gurney. Then a third on the third gurney. All arranged the same way, all blood-stained. But that wasn't the worst part. On each gurney, tucked under where the head would be, was an ID badge. Hospital employee badges from 1976. 3 names: Patricia Hollis, RN. Susan Chen, RN. Margaret Delaney, RN. The 3 nurses who disappeared. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I photographed everything. I went upstairs and demanded to speak to hospital administration. They listened to my report with increasingly disturbed expressions. Security came down with me to document the scene. The morgue was empty. No uniforms. No badges. Just 3 gurneys against the wall where I'd left them at the start of my shift. The security footage showed me entering the room, cleaning it, then leaving. Nothing about uniforms or badges. During my absence, the familiar static obscured the feed for 4 minutes. When it cleared, the room was empty. They sent me home. Mandatory psychological evaluation before I could return to work. The counselor was kind but firm: night shift isolation, sleep deprivation, possible early onset dementia. She recommended I consider early retirement. I refused. I'm not crazy. I know what I saw. But then yesterday, something happened that I can't explain, can't rationalize, can't dismiss as exhaustion or mental illness. I was suspended pending the psych evaluation, so I wasn't supposed to be at the hospital. But I had to know. I had to understand. I drove to Providence at 2 in the morning, parked in the employee lot, and used my badge to enter through the loading dock. Security was light, just one guard at the main desk, easy to avoid. I made my way to the basement. The morgue door was closed but unlocked. I pushed it open. All 3 gurneys were arranged in the center of the room, forming a triangle. On each gurney lay a nurse's uniform, perfectly arranged. On each uniform rested an ID badge. And standing in the center of the triangle, looking directly at me, was a figure. No, 3 figures. They wore the uniforms. Their faces were pale, gray, lips blue like drowning victims. They stared at me with eyes that held decades of terror, pleading, accusation. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. One of them, Patricia Hollis, according to the badge, opened her mouth. No sound came out, but I understood. Help us. Then they pointed. All 3, in perfect synchronization, pointing at the floor beneath the center gurney. The room began to spin. I heard a voice, my voice, screaming. I ran. Fell on the stairs, bruised my hip, didn't care. I burst out of the hospital into the parking lot and drove home doing 80 on deserted streets. This morning, I called the police. Told them everything. They were patient but skeptical. Ma'am, the hospital says you're on administrative leave for psychiatric reasons. We can do a wellness check if you're feeling unsafe. I'm not crazy. There's something under the floor in that morgue. Something they buried. We'll look into it. They won't. I know they won't. So I'm writing this down. All of it. If something happens to me, maybe someone will read this and understand. Maybe someone will force them to excavate that morgue floor. Because I know what's down there now. I know what happened to Patricia, Susan, and Margaret. And I know something else, something that's kept me from sleeping, eating, functioning. Something that's made me buy 3 deadbolts for my apartment door and check my closet 17 times before bed. Last night, my phone rang at 2 a.m. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. Static. Then, underneath the crackling, a voice. Female. Desperate. We're not alone down here. The call disconnected. When I checked my recent calls this morning, there was no record of it. But there was a new photo in my gallery. I didn't take it. I don't know how it got there. It's a picture of me, asleep in my bed. Taken from above, from the ceiling, as if someone were floating there. In the background, barely visible in the darkness, are 3 shapes standing around my bed. The metadata says the photo was taken at 2:07 a.m. last night. The same time I received that call. I'm writing this from my car. I can't go back to that apartment. Can't go back to that hospital. But I don't know where to go. Because if they can reach me here, they can reach me anywhere. And I keep thinking about what that voice said. We're not alone down here. Not that they're trapped. Not that they need help. That they're not alone. Something else is in that morgue. Something that's been there since 1976. Something that took 3 nurses during a night shift and was never found. And now it knows about me. The gurneys are just the beginning. I've been a private nurse for 37 years, and I've seen people die in every way imaginable. Heart attacks, strokes, cancer eating them from the inside out, dementia reducing brilliant minds to confusion and terror. I've held hands during last breaths, cleaned bodies after death, comforted families through unspeakable grief. I thought I'd seen the worst humanity had to offer. I was catastrophically wrong. My name is Patricia Hendricks, and I'm 61 years old. I have a small apartment in Soldotna, Alaska, where I've lived alone since my husband died 4 years ago. My daughter lives in Seattle with her family, and I see them maybe twice a year. The isolation doesn't bother me. I've always been comfortable with my own company. Private nursing pays well, especially the live-in assignments, and at my age with arthritis starting to settle into my knees, the idea of retiring debt-free is appealing. That's why I took the Faulkner job. The agency called me in late September. 3-month assignment, live-in care for an elderly man in a remote property near Kenai. The pay was exceptional, nearly double my usual rate. The client, Mr. Heinrich Faulkner, was 80 years old, recovering from a minor stroke, needed assistance with daily activities and medication management. Standard case. The property was isolated, about 40 minutes from the nearest town, but that didn't concern me. I've worked in remote locations before. Alaska is full of people who want to live and die far from civilization. There are some house rules, the agency coordinator said, her voice oddly hesitant. Mr. Faulkner is very particular. You'll need to follow his guidelines exactly. Of course. What are they? She read from a document. Never open the basement door. Never leave the property after dark. Never answer the landline telephone if it rings after midnight. Meals at specific times. Medication schedule is strict. He retires at 9 p.m. and is not to be disturbed until 7 a.m. Eccentric, but not unusual. Old people cling to routines. The basement rule was odd, but plenty of elderly clients have areas they don't want staff accessing. Pride, privacy, hoarding, I'd seen it all. Can you commit to 3 months? She asked. I thought about my mortgage payment, the hospital bills from my husband's final year that still haunted me, the way my retirement account looked anemic and insufficient. Yes, I said. I can commit. The property was exactly as remote as advertised. I drove my Subaru up a winding gravel road that snaked through dense spruce forest for miles, the October sky gray and oppressive overhead. The house appeared suddenly, a large 2-story structure that might have been beautiful once but now sagged with neglect. Dark wood siding, windows that reflected the surrounding forest like dead eyes, a wraparound porch with several boards rotted through. Mr. Faulkner met me at the door. He was tall, stooped with age, wearing a cardigan sweater and wool slacks that looked decades old. His face was deeply lined, liver spots covering his hands and scalp, but his eyes were sharp, disturbingly alert. Blue-gray eyes that tracked me with uncomfortable intensity. Miss Hendricks, he said, his voice accented, German, maybe, but strong. Welcome. You understand the rules? Yes, sir. The agency explained everything. Good. Follow them precisely. This is very important. He stepped aside to let me enter. The interior was dim, heavy curtains blocking most of the natural light. The furniture was old but well maintained, the kind of pieces you inherit and never replace. Every surface held framed photographs, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Mr. Faulkner with a woman I assumed was his wife. The two of them at various ages, various locations. Always smiling, but something about the smiles seemed forced, performative. Your room is upstairs, second door on the right, he said. I take breakfast at 7:30, lunch at noon, dinner at 6. Medication with each meal. You'll find the schedule posted in the kitchen. The first week passed uneventfully. My responsibilities were light, preparing meals, assisting with bathing, managing his medication regimen, monitoring his blood pressure and blood sugar. He was polite but distant, speaking only when necessary. He spent most of his time in the living room, staring out the window at the forest, or reading German-language books I couldn't decipher. The house was silent. Oppressively so. No television, no radio, just the creak of old wood and the whisper of wind through the trees outside. At night, lying in the guest room with its musty smell and too soft mattress, I'd hear footsteps in the hallway. Slow, shuffling steps. I assumed it was Mr. Faulkner getting up to use the bathroom, but the steps never seemed to go anywhere. They'd pace back and forth, then stop. I told myself it was the house settling, old pipes expanding and contracting. I was tired, adjusting to a new environment. The isolation was playing tricks on my perception. But I couldn't ignore the smell. It started on the 8th day. A faint odor seeping up from somewhere below, like meat left too long in a freezer during a power outage. That Swedish, rotten smell that coats the back of your throat. I mentioned it to Mr. Faulkner during breakfast. "I don't smell anything," he said, not looking up from his oatmeal. "It's coming from somewhere below. Maybe something died in the crawl space? A rat, or... There's nothing wrong with my house." His tone was sharp, final. "You're imagining it." I wasn't imagining it. The smell grew stronger over the following days, particularly near the basement door. The door itself was unremarkable, white painted wood, brass handle, located off the kitchen. No lock, just a simple latch. I walked past it dozens of times a day, and each time that smell would hit me, making my stomach clench. On the 12th night, the phone rang. I was in my room, reading a novel I brought from home, when I heard the landline ringing downstairs. Old-fashioned, shrill, cutting through the house's silence like a knife. I checked my watch, 2:17 a.m. Never answer the landline after midnight. The ringing continued. 10 times. 15. 20. It wasn't stopping. I put my pillow over my head, trying to block it out, but the sound bored through the fabric, relentless. Finally, at ring 34, I couldn't take it anymore. I went downstairs. The phone was an ancient rotary model, avocado green, mounted on the kitchen wall. It rang again, the physical bell inside clattering. My hand reached for it before I could stop myself. "Hello?" Silence. Then breathing. Not heavy, not threatening, just breathing. In and out, steady, calm. "Hello? Who is this?" A woman's voice, so faint I almost missed it. "Please. Get me out of here." "What? Who is this?" "Please, please, I'm still..." The line went dead. I stood there, receiver pressed to my ear, heart hammering. Wrong number. Had to be some confused person calling in the middle of the night. But that voice, it had been terrified, desperate. In the morning, I asked Mr. Faulkner about it. His face went pale, actually drained of color. His hands trembled as he lifted his coffee cup. "You answered the phone." "Yes, I'm sorry, but it wouldn't stop ringing, and..." It was interference. Lines cross sometimes, this far out. Atmospheric conditions. You heard nothing important. It was a woman. She sounded like she was in trouble. You misunderstood. He stood abruptly, nearly knocking over his chair. "Do not answer the phone again. That rule exists for a reason." The conversation was over. But I couldn't let it go. That voice haunted me. During my breaks, when Mr. Faulkner was napping, I started researching. The property records were public, available online through the Kenai Peninsula Borough website. The house had been owned by the Faulkner family since 1981. Heinrich Faulkner and his wife, Margaret Faulkner, purchased it for cash. Then I searched for Margaret Faulkner. The results made my blood run cold. Margaret Faulkner was reported missing in October 2010. Last seen at the couple's home near Kenai. Search parties combed the surrounding forest for weeks. No trace was ever found. The case went cold. Heinrich Faulkner gave interviews to the Anchorage Daily News, tearful, devastated. She went for a walk and never came back. This land is unforgiving. I fear she encountered a bear or fell into a ravine. She disappeared 15 years ago. And the house still had all her photographs displayed, like shrines. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to those footsteps pacing the hallway. Back and forth, back and forth. They sounded heavier than an 80-year-old man's shuffle. They sounded deliberate, like someone walking a patrol route. At 1:47 a.m., I heard something new. A sound from below, from the basement. Not footsteps, scratching. Like fingernails dragging across wood, desperate, frantic. I sat up, every nerve screaming at me to stay in bed, to pull the covers over my head like a child hiding from monsters. But I thought about that voice on the phone. Please get me out of here. I had to know. I crept downstairs, avoiding the steps that creaked. The house was freezing, my breath forming clouds in the darkness. The basement door stood at the end of the kitchen, and that rotting smell was overwhelming now, making me gag. The scratching continued, muffled but persistent. My hand touched the door handle. It was ice cold. I pulled it open. A staircase descended into blackness. The smell rolled out like a physical wave, and I doubled over, retching. When I could breathe again, I found the light switch. A single bulb flickered on, illuminating concrete steps going down. I descended. The basement was large, unfinished, with a dirt floor and stone foundation walls. My nursing training kicked in, cataloging details even as my mind recoiled in horror. There was a room constructed in the far corner, walls made of plywood, a door with multiple locks on the outside. Industrial shelving held plastic bins. A chest freezer hummed against one wall. The scratching was coming from the plywood room. I approached slowly, legs shaking so badly I almost fell. The locks were open, hanging loose. I pulled the door. Inside was a bedroom. A filthy mattress on the floor, a bucket in the corner, chains bolted to the wall. The chains ended in manacles, thick steel bands. On the mattress was a pile of clothing, women's clothing, decades old, stained with things I didn't want to identify. And on the far wall, scratched into the plywood with what must have been fingernails worn to bloody knobs, were words. Help me. Someone please. 1998-2001-2004-2007-2010. Margaret. 5 dates. 5 names scratched below them, barely legible. Margaret was the last. My stomach lurched. I turned to run and collided with something solid. Mr. Faulkner stood at the bottom of the stairs. In his hand was a revolver, old and well-maintained. It was pointed at my chest. I told you never to open this door, he said calmly. What did you do? My voice was barely a whisper. What I've always done. What I've been doing since 1998. He gestured with the gun. The first one, Christina, she was a nurse too. Like you. She was young, naive. Thought she could help an old man living alone. They all think that. Helpers. Caregivers. So trusting. Margaret, your wife, was my 6th. I married that one, thought it would provide better cover. She lasted 12 years before she stopped being useful. The scratching sound came again, and I realized with dawning horror that it wasn't a memory, wasn't residual. Something alive was making that sound. The others are in the freezer, he continued, conversational, like discussing the weather. Preserved. I keep them. All of them. You would have been number 9. Someone will come looking for me, I said, backing toward the plywood room. The agency will be told you quit. Sent an email saying the isolation was too much, family emergency, left in the night. Your car is already hidden in the woods. It happens all the time with these assignments. People leave. Nobody questions it. He advanced, and I saw in his eyes the same sharp alertness, but now I understood what it was. Predatory. Patient. He'd done this 8 times before. He knew exactly how this would go. I grabbed the only weapon available, the bucket from inside the room, and threw it at him. It hit his arm, knocked the gun sideways. The shot was deafening in the enclosed space, the bullet splintering with somewhere to my left. I ran for the stairs, slipped on the dirt floor, scrambled forward on hands and knees. His hand grabbed my ankle. I kicked backward, felt my shoe connect with something soft. He grunted. I made it to the stairs, took them 3 at a time, burst into the kitchen. The door, I had to get to the front door. But he was faster than he should have been, stronger. He tackled me in the living room, and we went down hard, my head cracking against the coffee table. Stars exploded across my vision. Stupid woman, he hissed in my ear. They're always so stupid. Did you think you could save anyone? Did you think anyone would believe you? I saw the photographs then, from my position on the floor. All those pictures of Margaret, smiling, perfect. And behind them, partially hidden, other photographs. Other women. Different faces, different decades, but all with the same smile. The same forced, terrified smile. He raised the gun. I grabbed a picture frame and swung it, glass shattering against his face. He screamed, dropped the gun, clutched at his eyes. I seized the revolver, pointed at him with shaking hands. I'd never fired a gun in my life, but survival is a powerful teacher. Stay back, I said. He looked at me through bloody fingers and smiled. You won't shoot. Nurses save people. It's what you do. You're not people, I said, and pulled the trigger. The recoil nearly broke my wrist. Mr. Faulkner, Heinrich, predator, killer, collapsed backward, clutching his shoulder. I didn't wait. I ran for my car, keys still in my purse upstairs, flew up the steps, grabbed my things, ran back down and out the front door into the freezing October night. My Subaru was gone. He'd meant it, already hidden in the woods. I ran anyway. Down that gravel road, my nursing shoes slipping on wet leaves, lungs burning in the cold air. I ran for what felt like hours, probably was 20 minutes, until I saw headlights. I stumbled into the road, waving my arms, and a truck screeched to a halt. The driver, a man in his 50s with kind eyes, took one look at me and called 911. The police found the house exactly as I described. The basement. The room. The names scratched into the walls. The freezer. They found 8 bodies in that freezer. 8 women, preserved in the cold, ranging in age from 23 to 56. Some had been there since 1998. DNA identification would take months, but they already knew who some of them were: cold cases, missing persons, women who'd vanished while working remote nursing assignments across Alaska. They found Heinrich Faulkner dead in the living room, my bullet in his shoulder, but the cause of death was a stroke. The stress and blood loss triggered a massive cerebral hemorrhage. The news called me a hero. The agency apologized profusely, claimed they'd been deceived, had no idea. My daughter flew up from Seattle and held me while I cried for 3 days straight. But here's what they don't understand. Here's what I can't explain to the therapists, the police, the journalists who keep calling. It's been 4 months. I'm living with my daughter now, in her spare bedroom in Seattle. I haven't returned to Alaska. I'll never return to Alaska. But every night, at 2:17 a.m., my phone rings. It's not my cell phone, I threw that away, got a new one, new number. It's not my daughter's landline. The ringing comes from nowhere, everywhere. Sometimes from inside my own head. And when I can't stop myself, when the ringing becomes unbearable and I answer the silence with a whispered hello, I hear them. All 8 of them. Breathing. Just breathing. In and out, steady, calm. And underneath, so faint I almost miss it, thank you. Thank you for letting us be found. Last night, there was a new voice. Younger than the others. Unfamiliar. Miss Hendricks, it said. There's something you should know. About the house. What? They found 8 bodies in the freezer. Yes, I know, I was. But there were 9 names on the wall. 9 dates. We counted. The police counted. My blood turned to ice. What are you saying? We're saying someone is still there. Still in that house. Still in that basement. Still alive. The line went dead. I called the police in Kenai this morning. Asked them to check the house again, please, one more time. They were patient but dismissive. The house has been processed, sealed, scheduled for demolition. There's nothing there. But I know better. Because last night, after that phone call, I received an email. From an address I didn't recognize. No subject line. Just an attachment. A photograph. It shows the basement of the Faulkner house. The plywood room. The chains on the wall. And sitting on that filthy mattress, looking directly at the camera, is a woman. She's young, maybe 30, wearing clothes from this decade. Her eyes are wild, desperate. And scratched into the wall behind her, in fresh gouges, are new words. Help me. 2025. Christina. The photograph's metadata shows it was taken yesterday. At 2:17 a.m. Someone is still there. And every night, my phone rings. I sell industrial equipment. Nothing glamorous, pumps, generators, the kind of machinery that keeps remote operations running in places where civilization is just a suggestion. September in Alaska means the tourism season is dying down, and that's when I do my best business. The construction crews, the mining operations, the oil field contractors, they all need someone willing to drive the Dalton Highway with a trunk full of parts catalogs and a smile that says, I can get it to you in 3 weeks, weather permitting. The Dalton is 414 miles of gravel and paranoia stretching from Living Good to Dead Horse, and I'd driven it maybe 40 times before that day. You learn to respect it. You pack extra food, extra water, emergency blankets, a satellite phone. You tell someone when you're leaving and when you expect to arrive. You don't stop unless you absolutely have to. But on September 17th, at 4:47 p.m. according to the dashboard clock when everything went to hell, my 2019 Ford F-150 made a sound like a dying animal and simply stopped. I was 53 miles past Coldfoot, the last vestige of what you could generously call civilization, and another 87 miles from my next scheduled stop. The sun was already thinking about setting, that golden autumn light that looks beautiful until you remember it means you have maybe 3 hours before total darkness in a place where the temperature drops to below freezing and the wolves start their evening rounds. I did everything right at first. Popped the hood, checked the obvious things. I'm not a mechanic, but I know enough to recognize that the problem was deep, internal, expensive, and utterly beyond my ability to fix on a gravel road in the middle of the Alaskan wilderness. The satellite phone came up next. I charged it that morning, I always did. But when I powered it on, I got nothing. No signal. Not even the searching indicator. Just a blank screen that mocked every dollar I'd spent on emergency preparedness. That's when the fear started creeping in. Not panic, not yet. Just that cold understanding that I was in serious trouble. I had maybe 6 hours of daylight left, and my options were simple: wait and hope someone came by, or walk. The Dalton sees traffic, but not reliably. You might see 3 trucks in an hour or none for 6 hours. In September, with the season winding down, it could be even longer. I decided to give it 2 hours. If no one came by, I'd start walking north. At least I'd be moving toward Deadhorse rather than away from everything. At 6:23 p.m., with the sun bleeding orange across the tundra and no vehicles having passed in either direction, I started walking. I took my emergency pack, left a note on the windshield, and began the long trudge north, each step crunching on gravel that seemed to echo in the vast emptiness. 47 minutes later, I saw the light. It was off to the west, maybe half a mile into the tree line, a warm yellow glow that spoke of shelter, heat, maybe even a radio or phone. Relief flooded through me like warm water. A cabin. Some trapper or hunting lodge. I'd get help, get warm, maybe even catch a ride. I left the road and headed toward it, pushing through the scrub brush and stunted spruce trees that marked the edge of the boreal forest. The ground was spongy with moss and decades of decomposed needles. As I got closer, I could smell its smoke. Someone was definitely there. The light seemed to flicker, firelight, maybe, or lanterns. But as I pushed through the last barrier of trees into a clearing, my brain struggled to process what I was seeing. It wasn't a cabin. It was a clearing, maybe 40 feet across, ringed with trees and lit by 3 camping lanterns hung from branches. In the center, there was a large blue tarp spread on the ground, and on that tarp, there were things. Pieces. Sections of moose. I recognized a partial head, the distinctive antlers. Meat. Lots of meat. Industrial-sized coolers, the kind you use for hunting camps, stood open. And 4 men, working in the lantern light with the efficiency of a practice crew. My first thought was hunters processing their kill. Totally legal, totally normal. I'd stumbled on a hunting camp. But then I saw the backpack. It was a North Face pack, bright red, propped against one of the coolers. Next to it was a pink jacket, a woman's jacket, the kind of high-end outdoor gear that serious hikers wear. And beside that, folded neatly, were jeans. A pair of hiking boots. A blue fleece. Human clothes. Civilian clothes. The kind of things someone would be wearing on a backcountry trek. My eyes went back to the tarp, to the meat they were cutting, packaging, organizing with the calm efficiency of butchers. Moose meat. It was moose meat. Had to be. Except moose don't wear North Face backpacks. One of the men looked up. He was maybe 50, bearded, wearing the kind of rugged outdoor gear that wouldn't look out of place anywhere in Alaska. Our eyes met across the clearing. For a moment, maybe 3 seconds, maybe less, neither of us moved. His knife hung in the air, mid-cut. Blood dripped from the blade onto the tarp with a soft pattering sound that I can still hear in quiet moments. Then his expression changed. Not to surprise. Not to fear. To calculation. I ran. Terror, real primal terror, is not what you see in movies. There's no dramatic music, no slow-motion realization. It's an instant chemical explosion in your body that turns your legs into pistons and your heart into a drum that threatens to break your ribs. I crashed back through the trees, branches whipping my face, roots trying to trip me, my breath coming in ragged gasps that burned my throat. Behind me, I heard shouting. Not words, sounds. Coordinated sounds. They were communicating, but not with language. Sharp whistles, two short, one long. A response from another direction, similar but different. They were splitting up. Flanking. I ran toward where I thought the road was, but in my panic, in the failing light, everything looked the same. Spruce trees and shadows and the sound of my own terrified breathing. A raven exploded from a branch above me with a harsh croak that nearly stopped my heart. I heard them in the trees. Not crashing through like I was, but moving with purpose, with coordination. Another whistle, closer now. An answering call from my left. They were hurting me. The realization hit like ice water. They'd done this before. This wasn't panic. This was hunting. I changed direction, cutting hard right, pushing through a thick stand of brush that tore at my jacket. My foot caught on something and I went down hard, face first into the moss. The impact drove the air from my lungs. For a terrible moment I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, could only lie there gasping like a fish. Footsteps. Close. Moving through the brush with terrible confidence. I forced myself up, kept moving, and then, miracle of miracles, I broke through the trees and there was the road, that beautiful strip of gray gravel cutting through the wilderness. But which way? North or south? In my panicked flight I'd lost all sense of direction. I chose north at random and ran, my boots pounding on gravel, each breath a knife in my lungs. Behind me, a whistle. Clear. Loud. On the road. I looked back. One of them stood at the tree line maybe 100 yards behind me, backlit by the dying sun, just watching. Not running. Not chasing. Just standing there like he had all the time in the world. Because he knew. They knew. There was nowhere to go. The next anything was nearly 80 miles away. Another whistle, this one to my right, in the trees paralleling the road. They weren't chasing me. They were pacing me. Playing with me. I moved to Eagle River in March of 2022 because I wanted safety. That's what everyone wants when they have a 7-year-old daughter, right? A quiet neighborhood 15 miles north of Anchorage, where kids still ride bikes without helmets and neighbors bring over casseroles when you're sick. The kind of place where you know everyone's name and the biggest crime is someone's trash can blowing over in the wind. Our house was a modest 3-bedroom rancher with blue siding and a yard that would be perfect for Emma's swing set come summer. The neighborhood was older, established, retired couples mostly, their grown children long since moved to Seattle or Portland. It felt safe. Grandmotherly. Exactly what a single mom teaching 2nd grade needs after a divorce that left me jumpy and exhausted. Gerald Hutchins lived next door. 71 years old, widowed for a decade, with a kind face that reminded me of my own grandfather. He brought us cookies the day we moved in, homemade snickerdoodles still warm from the oven, and offered to help with anything we needed. When Emma's ball rolled into his yard, he'd toss it back with a gentle underhand that made her giggle. He asked about her school, remembered her teacher's name, waved at us every morning when we left for school. He was perfect. Safe. Harmless. For 2 years, I never questioned it. Emma loved him. Mr. Gerald, she called him, in that way kids do when they're taught to respect their elders but can't quite manage formal distance. He let her pick raspberries from his garden in summer. He showed her how to identify different birds, bald eagles circling overhead, magpies chattering in the trees, ravens with their distinctive croaking calls. Sometimes I'd come home and find them on his porch, Emma listening with rapt attention while he told stories about old Alaska, before the pipeline, when everything was different. I felt lucky. Blessed, even. A good neighbor who looked out for us, who shoveled our walk in winter without being asked, We watched the house when I took Emma to visit my parents in Oregon over Christmas break. January 14th, 2024. That's the day everything shattered. Gerald had complained about low water pressure, and since I had the same issue the month before, I recommended my plumber, Randy, a gruff 50-something who'd fixed our problem in 40 minutes. Gerald called him. Randy showed up on a Tuesday afternoon while I was at school, Emma at her after-school program. I got the call at 3:47 p.m. Randy's voice was shaking. "Mrs. Patterson, you need to call the police. Right now. I'm at your neighbor's house and... Jesus Christ, you need to call them." My first thought was Gerald had died. Heart attack, stroke, something sudden and tragic. Is he okay? Is Mr. Hutchins? Just call them. Don't come home. Keep your daughter away. Just call them. The police were there when I arrived, 3 patrol cars and an unmarked sedan that meant detectives. Yellow tape already cordoned off Gerald's house. Neighbors clustered on the street in small groups, whispering, staring. I saw Randy sitting in the back of an ambulance, his face gray, a blanket around his shoulders despite the relatively mild 30-degree weather. Detective Sarah Chin found me before I could get out of my car. She was young, maybe 35, with the kind of serious expression that police develop when they've seen too much. "Mrs. Patterson? Jennifer Patterson? What happened? Is Gerald? Mr. Hutchins is in custody. We need to talk, but not here. Is there somewhere we can take you? And you mentioned you have a daughter? Emma. She's 7. She's still at after-school care. I haven't picked her up yet." "Good. Don't. Not yet. We need to sweep your house first." The terror that went through me then was electric. Sweep my house? Why? What the hell is going on? Chin glanced at Gerald's house, then back at me. The plumber opened a wall. He was looking for pipes. He found something else. They took me to the station. Gave me coffee I couldn't drink. Put me in a room that was too bright and too small and smelled like industrial cleaner and fear. Chin sat across from me with a manila folder that she didn't open right away, and that somehow made it worse. "Mrs. Patterson, how well did you know Gerald Hutchins?" "He's my neighbor. 2 years. He's nice. Kind. He helped us. He was good to my daughter." My voice broke. "Please tell me what's happening." She opened the folder. The plumber found a room, hidden behind a false wall in what appeared to be a storage closet. The room was approximately 8 by 10 feet. The walls were covered, floor to ceiling, with human hair. The words didn't make sense at first. My brain refused to process them. Hair? Braids. Organized by color and length. Some of them appear to be decades old. We're still cataloging, but preliminary count suggests several hundred individual samples. She paused. "Mrs. Patterson, we found hair that matches you and your daughter." The room tilted. Everything went cold and distant, like I was watching this happen to someone else. That can't be. When was the last time Mr. Hutchins was in your house? I don't. Christmas. We gave him a key when we went to Oregon. He watered our plants. Did he ever show particular interest in your hair? Your daughter's hair? Comments, touching. No. He never. But even as I said it, memories started surfacing. Gerald commenting on Emma's pretty blonde braids. Asking what shampoo we used because his late wife had similar hair. Standing a little too close at the mailbox, close enough that I could feel his breath when he spoke. The bald eagles. They were always circling his house, more than anywhere else in the neighborhood. I thought it was charming, some Disney movie detail. Now the memory made my skin crawl, those huge birds with their white heads, circling, watching, their sharp eyes seeing everything. Chin pulled out photographs. I didn't want to look but couldn't stop myself. The room. Walls of hair, organized with obsessive precision. Braids hung from hooks like grotesque curtains, labeled with dates and what I realized were initials. Different shades, blonde, brown, black, red, gray. A museum of violation. We found diaries. Detailed logs going back 43 years. He documented everything, when he took the samples, how he acquired them, his thoughts about each person. She pulled out another photo. These were in his bedroom. Pictures. Hundreds of them. Women sleeping. In their beds, in their homes, photographed through windows and this made my stomach heave, from inside their houses. I saw myself in one, asleep in my bed, mouth slightly open, completely vulnerable. Another of Emma, curled under her frozen comforter, clutching her stuffed rabbit. He had keys, Chin said quietly. Copies of keys for 17 houses in your neighborhood going back decades. He'd enter when people were asleep or away. He'd take small amounts of hair from brushes, pillows, sometimes cutting it directly while they slept. He documented everything, their routines, their habits, whether they locked their windows. Oh God, I whispered, and then I was crying, great heaving sobs that felt like they'd tear me apart. Some of the hair samples match women who disappeared. For so far, but we're still comparing against missing persons databases. Chen's voice was gentle but relentless. Susan Morrison, 1987. Kitty Valdez, 1993. Michelle Tran, 2001. Rebecca Yates, 2015. All from the Eagle River and Anchorage area. All cases went cold. He killed them? We don't know. He's not talking. But we found more than hair. Jewelry. Clothing items. Personal effects that have no reason to be there. They kept me for 6 hours, asking questions I couldn't answer. How often did Gerald interact with Emma? Did I ever notice anything missing? Did I know about his late wife? She died of cancer in 2011, that part was true, at least. Did I know he'd lived in that house since 1981? 43 years. 43 years of this. When they finally let me go, they sent an officer to collect Emma from after-school care. I couldn't do it. Couldn't face her, couldn't pretend everything was okay when nothing would ever be okay again. They'd already searched our house, found fibers in our air vents where he'd hidden micro cameras. Found evidence he'd been entering regularly, always careful, always methodical, never disturbing anything enough to raise alarm. The officer who brought Emma home had kind eyes. Emma clutched my leg, confused and scared by the police presence, by my tears, by the chaos. Mommy, what's wrong? Where's Mr. Gerald? How do you tell your 7-year-old that the nice old man next door had been violating your home for 2 years? That he'd watched her sleep, photographed her, collected pieces of her? Mr. Gerald is sick, baby. He had to go away. That night, I couldn't let her sleep alone. We lay together in my bed with every light in the house blazing. I pulled down all the curtains, but I could still feel eyes on us. Every creak of the house settling, every sound outside made my heart race. The bald eagles that roost in the trees behind our house, their shadows passing across windows, looked like human shapes in my peripheral vision. I'm a freelance photographer. Not the wedding kind or the corporate headshot kind, I chase light. Specifically, I chased the aurora borealis, that ethereal dance of green and purple that turns the Arctic sky into something that looks photoshopped even when you're standing right underneath it. Magazines pay good money for the perfect shot, and December in Fairbanks is prime season. 20 hours of darkness, clear skies, and geomagnetic activity that makes the lights ride like living things across the frozen sky. I'd done this trip a dozen times before. Solo camping 40 miles outside Fairbanks, near the Chautauqua River, where light pollution is non-existent and the auroras are so vivid they cast shadows on the snow. 3 weeks, just me and my cameras, living out of a reinforced winter tent that could handle the brutal -40 temperatures. I'm 34 years old, fit enough to handle the physical demands, and careful enough to have survived this long doing something objectively dangerous. December 8th, 2023. That's when it started. I'd been out there 5 days, settling into the rhythm of Arctic winter, sleep during the brief daylight hours, wake at 3 p.m., set up equipment, shoot all night, back to the tent by 10 a.m. The isolation was part of the appeal. Just me, the infinite sky, and the silence that's so complete you can hear your own heartbeat. That morning, returning to camp after a successful night shooting, I noticed something odd. Footprints in the snow, circling my tent. Boot prints, human-sized, and fresh enough that the wind hadn't filled them in yet. My first thought was another photographer, maybe someone who'd seen my camp and wanted to say hello. Happens sometimes, the Aurora community is small and friendly. But these prints just circled. They didn't approach the tent entrance. They looped around maybe 15 feet out, a complete circuit, then headed back toward the tree line. Weird, but not alarming. Not yet. I checked my equipment, made coffee on my camp stove, and tried to sleep. But something nagged at me. Those footprints. Something about them felt wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. At 4 p.m. I woke up and went outside to examine them in the dying light. That's when I saw it clearly, the tread pattern. It was identical to my boots. Not similar, identical. The same Kamek winter boots I was wearing, with the same distinctive word pattern on the left heel where I tend to drag my foot slightly. Coincidence, I told myself. Kameks are popular in Alaska. Lots of people have the same boots. The word pattern was just chance. But that night, setting up my cameras, I couldn't shake the creeping unease. I kept looking over my shoulder at the tree line, that wall of black spruce silhouetted against the star-filled sky. The wolves were active that night. I could hear them howling in the distance, that eerie chorus that sounds almost human if you're not used to it. I'd always found it beautiful before. That night it sounded like warnings. I shot for 6 hours, got some incredible footage of the auroras rippling overhead in waves of green and purple, and headed back to camp around 2 a.m. My headlamp cut a cone of white light through the absolute darkness. The footprints were back. Fresh ones, from that night. Same circular pattern around my tent, about 15 feet out. Same boots. Same wear pattern. My heart started hammering. I pulled out my satellite phone, no messages, no missed calls. I was completely alone out here. The nearest human being was probably the family running the small lodge 40 miles south, and they knew I was here but wouldn't check on me for another 2 weeks. I went into the tent and locked the entrance, a flimsy zipper that wouldn't stop anyone determined, but it made me feel marginally safer. I didn't sleep. I sat with my largest flashlight and my bear spray, listening to every sound. The wind. The tent fabric flexing. The distant wolves. And once, around 4 a.m., what might have been footsteps crunching in snow, or might have been my imagination turning the sound of my own pulse into threats. At first light I walked the perimeter. The footprints were clear and undeniable. Someone had circled my tent while I was out shooting. They'd stayed at a precise distance, never approaching closer than 15 feet. Why? What kind of person does that? I should have left then. Packed up and driven back to Fairbanks. But I'm stubborn, and I had assignments to fulfill, and part of me, the rational part, still insisted there had to be an explanation. Maybe some local who thought it was funny to mess with the outsider photographer. Maybe someone mentally ill who wandered out of Fairbanks and didn't mean any harm. I set up trail cameras that day. 4 of them, positioned to cover all approaches to my camp. Motion activated, infrared capable, with SD cards that could hold thousands of images. If someone came back, I'd have proof. That night I barely shot any aurora footage. I spent most of the time in my tent, checking the trail camera feeds on my laptop. Nothing. Hours of nothing. Just the empty landscape, the blowing snow, the occasional Arctic hare hopping past. At 3:17 a.m., all 4 cameras went to static simultaneously. Not dead batteries, I'd installed fresh ones that morning. Not SD card errors. Just pure white static, like someone had aimed an electromagnetic pulse at them. The static lasted 14 minutes. When the feeds came back, everything was normal. Except the footprints. In the morning there were fresh ones again, same pattern, same distance. Whoever it was had circled my tent during those exact 14 minutes. The fear was different now. Not the rational fear of bears or wolves or weather, things I understood and could prepare for. This was something else, something calculated and wrong. Someone was watching me. Studying me. And they had the equipment and knowledge to disable trail cameras. I tried calling out. Hello? I know you're out there. What do you want? My voice sounded small and pathetic in the vast silence. No response. Just the wind and the creaking of isolated trees. Day 8. I found something new. Hanging from a branch near my camp, a Polaroid photograph. Of me. Asleep in my tent. Taken from outside, shooting through the small mesh vent window. The angle meant whoever took it had been standing maybe 3 feet from my head while I slept. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped it. The photo was recent. I was wearing the thermal shirt I'd worn 2 nights ago. Someone had been that close. That close while I was unconscious and vulnerable. I ran to my truck. It was time to leave, assignments be damned. But when I turned the key, nothing happened. Dead battery. Impossible, it had been fine, I'd run it every other day to keep it charged. I popped the hood. The battery cables were disconnected. Not broken, not corroded. Deliberately removed and set aside neatly on the engine block. The satellite phone. I grabbed it, hands trembling. Dead. Completely drained despite being fully charged that morning. I was trapped. The wolves sounded closer that night. Their howls seemed to come from all directions, echoing through the trees. I'd read somewhere that wolves don't attack adult humans, that there hadn't been a fatal wolf attack in Alaska in decades. But in that moment, with darkness pressing in and something worse than wolves circling my camp, those statistics meant nothing. I didn't set up cameras that night. I stayed in the tent with every light I had burning, clutching my bear spray like it would protect me from whatever nightmare I'd stumbled into. The auroras danced overhead. I could see them through the tent skylight panel, gorgeous and indifferent to my terror. At some point I must have passed out from exhaustion. I woke to daylight and silence. And footprints. But this time they came right up to my tent. They stopped at the entrance. I could see where someone had stood, shifting their weight for what must have been a long time based on how compressed the snow was. They watched me sleep from inches away, separated only by nylon fabric. I lost it then. Completely lost it. I grabbed my cameras, my most essential gear, and started walking. 40 miles to the lodge. I could do it. I had to do it. 3 miles in, I found another Polaroid stuck on a tree branch at eye level. Me, walking. Taken from behind, maybe an hour ago based on the light. Which meant whoever it was, they were ahead of me now. I turned around. Ran back to camp, sobbing, my breath coming in ragged gasps that burned my lungs in the -30 air. The camp was untouched. But there was something new. A pile of objects, neatly arranged on a flat rock near my tent. My objects. The spare jacket I'd left in my truck. My backup satellite phone battery, the one I'd hidden in the locked glove compartment. My grandmother's necklace that I never took off except when sleeping, that I kept in the inner pocket of my sleeping bag. Someone had been through everything I owned. Had studied my life, my belongings, knew me intimately. Day 12. I'd stopped trying to leave. Stopped trying to understand. I just existed in a fog of terror and exhaustion, barely eating, barely sleeping. The footprints came every night. Sometimes circling, sometimes approaching, always in my boots, always with my wear pattern. The Polaroids kept appearing. Me eating. Me crying. Me looking directly at the camera even though I'd seen nothing, no one, no flash. The trail cameras stayed static. My truck stayed dead. The satellite phone stayed useless. On day 14, I noticed something in one of the Polaroids. In the background, partially obscured by trees, a tent. Not mine. Another tent, winter-rated, maybe a quarter mile from my position based on the tree placement. They were camping. Whoever this was, they'd set up their own camp. This wasn't someone passing through. They'd planned this. They'd come here specifically for what? For me? That night I heard something new. My voice. Calling my name. Rebecca. Rebecca, are you awake? My own voice, calling to me from outside the tent. Perfect mimicry, like a recording, but I'd never recorded myself saying those words. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Terror had frozen my vocal cords. Rebecca, I brought you something. Come outside. I buried my face in my sleeping bag and tried to pray, but I couldn't remember any prayers. The rescue came on day 16. A helicopter, sent because the lodge owner had gotten worried when I didn't check in on schedule. I'd never been so grateful to hear engine noise in my life. The state troopers found him that afternoon. Jason Whitmore, 36 years old, from Seattle. He had a camp a quarter mile from mine, exactly where I'd seen it in the Polaroid. In his tent they found hundreds of photographs. Of me, going back weeks. He'd been following me since I'd arrived in Fairbanks, tracking my social media, learning my routines. He had a journal filled with careful notes about my schedule, my preferences, my mannerisms. He'd bought identical boots and worn them in a way that matched my gait, practicing for hours based on videos he'd taken of me walking. The electromagnetic device he used on my cameras was homemade but sophisticated. He disabled my truck, my phones, isolating me systematically. His stated plan, according to his journal, was to become close to her until I accepted him as part of my life. The final entry, dated the night before the rescue, read, "Tomorrow I introduce myself. She's ready now. She needs me." They found more in his Seattle apartment. Evidence of 3 previous women he'd done this to. All photographers. All solo travelers. One in Montana, one in Iceland, one in Norway. They'd all reported similar experiences, the stalking, the photographs, the mimicry. One of them had disappeared. Her case was still open. Jason Whitmore hanged himself in jail before trial. No note. No explanation beyond what was in his journals. I don't work alone anymore. I can't. The moment I'm isolated, the panic sets in. My therapist says I have severe PTSD, anxiety disorder, possible paranoid tendencies. I take medication that makes my hands shaky and my thoughts slow. I sold all my Aurora equipment. Can't look at the lights anymore without feeling watched. Last week, I received a package. No return address. Inside was a Polaroid I'd never seen before. Me, in my apartment here in Portland, asleep on my couch. Taken through my window. Taken last month based on the blanket I'm using. The police say it's a copycat, someone who read about the case. They say Whitmore is dead and can't hurt me. But in the photo, if you look very carefully at the window's reflection, you can see the person holding the camera. They're wearing my boots. The same kamiks, with the same one left heel. And their eyes, you can just barely make them out in the reflection's distorted image. They look exactly like mine.